Get your rub on with.
All right, hello world. This is the Addicted to the Q barbecue Q&A with Plowboys BBQ, sponsored by King Louis Meat Apostle. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great.
All right,
no more football left. Chiefs wound up just clearing the table, and so now I got Sundays free.
That was a heck of a game. Except now I started watching the XFL this weekend.
Yeah,
there's certain rules I kind of like better, but
yeah, NFL Network's replaying like almost all of the Chiefs seasons, so I'm like rewatching games from the season.
Last night I was watching like interviews of like Derek Thomas and some of the old people that were on there.
Yeah.
So let's get started. Introduce yourself and tell us your team name.
All right, Todd Johns, and we've been competing as Pork Pullin' Plowboys since 2001, and most people know us as Plowboys BBQ.
So I have a question. There is a Hole in the Wall Plowboys BBQ in Marshall. Is that affiliated with you guys, or is that?
That is my brother-in-law, Randy. And so Randy and I started this thing. Really, he's the one that got us into it. When I was at the time dating his sister, there'd been nobody new in the family for 10 years. And so, I was a little nervous coming around, and everyone was so established, and Randy's her oldest brother. And so when we'd get together at family events, he'd always try to make talk, and so we ended up talking about barbecue. I was just getting started, getting interested in it, and Randy was a hog producer for many years, and he had done a lot of work with the Missouri Pork Producers Association, National Pork Board, and he had done, for us back then, big cooks. And so we would end up talking about cooking pork butts and hogs and whatever. And to me, that was like, I was just working on a little Brinkman piece of crap in my backyard. So, that was big deal stuff. And so that went on for a couple years, and he said, we should do this thing called a barbecue contest. And I said, well, what's that? And he explained it, and I said, well, I'll try that. And in 2000, we went to the American Royal and took the judging class there. And Ed Royth was the instructor. Probably these days, not a lot of people know who Ed Royth was. And then Gary Wells was the cook. So Gary and Carolyn are the kind of the main founders of KCBS, and Gary was the cook. And Gary was still with us back then. So it's kind of cool that we got to kind of learn what this barbecue thing is from the guy who, pretty much started it. And so that was October of 2000. And then we entered some contests the next year. And mostly, like back then, there was a lot of local non-KCBS things. We did a 4th of July thing in Alma, Missouri, just like 10 teams or something. And there was a lot more like backyard stuff back then. And then the Missouri State Fair was one of the first ones we did. We did that for several years. And that was like a one-day thing you rolled in. So Randy's the one that kind of was like, we should do this thing. And I was like, let's go. And so about 10 years ago, we were together at a family thing, and Randy said, well, I'm thinking about doing a restaurant. I'm going to call it Plowboys. I said, oh, well, I'm thinking about doing one too, and I'm going to call it Plowboys. And we just said, well, I guess that'll work. So we just ended up launching under the same name. He's an hour away from Kansas City, and it really has never been a big problem having, the restaurants I Central Missouri. So, but he's still up and going. We closed in August after a 10-year run, and he's still doing a lot of catering and got his operation still going.
My wife used to work in Marshall, so I've had it a few times. Burnt ends are pretty good there.
What's that?
I said my wife worked in Marshall, so I've had it a few times. Those burnt ends are really good.
Yeah, and our barbecue is real similar, but just a little bit different. And of course, we kind of learned together, and so our flavors were really, really close. And then, they were pretty close in the restaurant, but his food is very much like how we used to cook. And whenever I have his food, I just love it because his daughter got married a couple summers ago, and he and his staff cooked and served the whole meal, and I was just like, man, this takes me back. I love his food, and he's an amazing cook. I would say I've learned from so many people over 23 years, but I've learned the most from Randy. And he's the one that, like I said, got us into it, and we've had so many talks about sauces and rubs and commercial barbecue and competitions over the last 20 plus years. I mean, he's probably my ultimate best buddy in barbecue for sure.
So do you still compete?
We go out to the American Royal every year. I'll do, some charity little things here and there. NBBQA was this week, and I, helped Kel by doing the firefight competition on Wednesday night and just little things like that. But it got too hard to manage the restaurants and really at this point an international rub and sauce business and still try to compete. And the other side of it is if I'm going to compete, I'm going to be competitive, and it's hard to be competitive if you're not out there all the time. And I just saw that, there's no way I'm going to be able to I'm just going to be wasting my time out there. And if, life ever opens back up and if I can obsess about competition barbecue again, because that's really what it takes. I mean, these guys now, we were cooking in the mid 20s, like 24, 26 contests a year. These guys, I mean, they're out 40, sometimes 50 contests doing back-to-backs. And there's so many back-to-back weekends now, and you can really rack up a lot of contests. And it's hard to compete against that, when folks are out there that committed. And we just had too many irons in the fire, and we've had our time, and we had a great run for a long time. And we'll still pull a ribbon every now and then, so it's all right.
So do you cook by yourself or do you have teammates?
When we go out to the Royal, Randy and I will cook together. But when I was competing a lot, I was a one-person show most of the time. And I always thought that maybe I just didn't work well with others, which is probably true. But it was hard to have someone come in and just kind of help you, because you end up spending as much attention teaching them and telling them what they need to do that it was just easier to do it yourself. And when I started getting more consistent and more successful, it was because I was getting more simple and I was cutting steps out. And I think being a one-person cook most of the time really helped me become a better cook, because I had to focus more, because there was no one else there to wash that dish for me. And no, there was no one else to clean up between entries. There was no one else to run boxes in. I had to do it all. So every single step that it took in the camp to produce 4 entries was all me, and then clean up and go home. So I got my 14-step rib process with 7 different ingredients down to about 4 steps, and with just half of those ingredients, So the more I pulled things back, actually, the better I got. And so as people were trying to do more, I was trying to do less. And I really think it helped focus on the things you were doing. It's easier to focus and be consistent on 7 steps than it is 11. Yep. And so if you can cut that down. One of the things that my buddies still give me crap about was I used hotel pans. I had a trailer, and inside the trailer I had this old it didn't work anymore, but I got it on auction. It was a Subway workstation. So when you go down Subway and they've got the hot and the cold, well, I had one of those built into the trailer, and it was perfect because it held 6 hotel pans dropped in, and then it had a big counter, and it was a great workspace. And so I would have these metal hotel pans, and we would line them with foil, and then that way when you're done, you just rip the foil out, and you have a clean pan again, and you just put new foil down, or maybe just a quick wipe with some spray or something. But you didn't have all these really nasty pans, and you could reuse them. Well, I had a certain way you had to foil the pan. Otherwise, if you didn't do it right, then it would puncture, and then it defeated the purpose. And so I would make guys refoil pans all the time. I still get crap about that. But so just those kind of little things that if it can save you from washing a dish or just really quickly washing a dish versus really having to clean. I mean, all those little things just really meant a lot. So, but yes, the answer to your question is I cook by myself.
I compete, and it's just me and my son, but he's more of a hand me this, hand me that. I run my own boxes. If I'm going to mess something up, I only have myself to blame.
Right.
I'm too much of a person that if something would go wrong, and I'd feel bad if I messed it up for our team or vice versa.
Yeah. And I think there's also just, I don't like to negotiate with others. I just, if that's the plan, then if that plan makes sense to me, I don't want to spend time convincing you that that's a good plan or having, feeling obligated that you got to weigh in. And it just sometimes was easier that way. And that's why when you do have teams that have multiple people, a lot of times they'll split and be like, well, I'm going to cook this and you're going to cook that. And then, you just tell me what you need. And that's kind of how that works. But so.
Nope, I completely agree. I have more questions. So I think you already answered this one, but who is your biggest barbecue mentor?
Like I said, I think I've learned probably the most from Randy. I've learned a lot alongside Andy Groneman. We cooked a lot together, and we've cooked a lot over the years together. We're great friends, and I think over the years, probably I've learned as much as Andy's learned from me, and vice versa. And I think everybody kind of has a couple of people in their circle like that, where they just can't wait to talk about barbecue and share what they've learned. And we've cooked a lot together over the years too, so there's a lot of things we learned at the same time. In terms of business, gosh, I mean, a lot of people. Famous Dave's been a great person that I could just anytime I could pick up the phone and when I was doing the restaurants, just pick up the phone to Dave and see what his thoughts were on something. But yeah, gosh, I mean, just so many people, and even in Kansas City, the restaurant at large, the restaurant business in Kansas City is a very friendly thing. There's people just supporting each other all over. But really on the barbecue side, it's a lot like that. I found very few people that weren't willing to lend you a hand or give you some advice or talk to you, and vice versa. It's a very giving community, just like on the competition trail. And, so in Blue Springs here, there's one other barbecue restaurant that was competing with us, and it's Zarda Barbecue. They've been around for going on 50 years. And, you would think in a town of 60,000, we'd be competing against each other. And technically we were, but we would do projects together. If they needed something and we had it, we would share, vice versa. We vended at the American Royal the one year it was at Arrowhead together, and we worked together and shared a tent and shared supplies. And so people always find that interesting when, two people who theoretically should be in competition with each other and not want to help each other, they always find it interesting that it's the opposite. And Terry Heyer, who runs Zarda's, we would try to have coffee together like once a quarter, 3-4 times a year. We try to get together and just hang out and talk business and, what's happening in your world. And, he gave me more advice than I probably gave him, but that's, that's one of the great things about barbecue is just there's so many people out there that, want to buy rubs, want to buy sauces, want to come into a restaurant, that you're not going to, we're not saturated even at this point. So NBBQA just happened, and we were all down in Florida for that in Orlando. And it's the same thing here. You have all these people across the industry coming together to mentor each other and talk to each other and share what they've learned. And it's a very kind of inclusive industry that way.
There's one thing I always say about it's more like a barbecue family.
Yeah. Now from, 11:55 to 1:35, we want to slit each other's throats, but that's competition. But even then, I mean, if you're in the middle of a turn-in and you're missing something, or you need an extra piece of parsley or whatever, you go to your neighbor and they've got it. And then what I always love is in turn-ins, when you're going back and forth with turn-ins, everyone's like, good luck, good luck, good luck, and never seen you before, but man, I hope you kill it. So even people you don't know, you just wish them the best. And then at awards time, just everybody's cheering for everybody. It's a great thing. It's always been that way.
Definitely a one-of-a-kind sport, that is for sure.
Yeah.
So, what's the one thing you love most about competition barbecue? The camaraderie or the?
Well, maybe at one time it was the plastic bowling trophies that they handed out, but after a while, those don't mean so much anymore. And now, they're just hanging. Now they don't have trophy cases in restaurants; they're just hanging out in the basement. But the camaraderie and the people is a big part of it. And at the end, that'll be the thing that will mean the most. I also think that as a competitor, it's trying to perfect your craft and trying to, at the heart of this, it's really a competitive thing, whether it's business or actual food competition. And so, there's a lot of that aspect of it too. That's at the heart of it. Just trying to be better, trying to be more consistent, trying to turn out a better product. I think that kind of OCD / competitive nature, it's something that fulfills us. There's one of the things I learned early was that there was a lot of IT people in competition, and I come from IT background, and it seemed like I was finding a lot of people that came from technology. And when I thought about it, it really satisfies. There's kind of two different people that are involved in technology and in computers and whatnot. You've got really process-driven people and really analytical people. And competition barbecue satisfies both of those things. You have to be really analytical and break down like what worked or didn't work. And if it wasn't working, what should I change? I don't want to change every variable. I need to just change one or two and then test that and see how that does. And then maybe change one more. And so, that would always be advice I'd give to new people is don't come in and do a whole recipe change. Just change a couple of things, maybe just be one or two things that are broken. But that whole analytical thinking really is satisfying for an IT person. And then the other is process. And I'm more of a process person. I'm kind of more of a project manager, development manager type. And so, developing process and having that, you can't go out and do 20, 30, 40 contests a year and just be making it up as you go. You have to know exactly what your steps are. And we started out, like I said, in 2001, and we were terrible for a long time. Back then, there was not a lot of information on the internet. There were no videos. I was talking with Ray Lampy, Dr. Barbecue, this weekend, and was remembering the first instructional videos that we ever got was not on YouTube because that didn't exist. It wasn't online. Chris Lilly did a video series, and it was the first one that any of us remember. It was probably 2003. and he had a video cassette. It wasn't even on DVD yet, so he had a video cassette for pork, brisket, hog, whatever. And Randy had bought the set, and we sat in front of his TV and watched those a couple of times. But out in competition, everyone was pretty quiet, pretty secret, unless you really had someone that was willing to take you under their wing and teach you a few things. It was all figured out on your own, buddy. And so, we were lost in the desert for a long time. It took us 70 contests to win our first one. And our first contest we won in September of 2007. So we had been doing that was our 7th year of competing. So it took us a while. And then after that, we had it figured out. And then it was just, we kept just knocking them off after that. We had a good 3 or 4 years. And then restaurants started. But so I don't know what we were talking about, but it led into that. But so yeah, we were pretty bad for a long time, and there just weren't a lot of secrets shared. There wasn't a lot of stuff online, and there were no classes. And the first class that we really remember that was really targeted for competition, and Ray Lampe had done classes, which we never got a chance to attend. Paul Kirk had been doing classes, but Mike and Debbie Davis back in the mid 2000s were the hottest barbecue team that had ever been seen. They have 4 American Royal overall champions. One year they knocked off like 19 grand champions and 21 reserves. And I mean, they were crazy insane. And they did a non-tell-all class in Lynchburg. So they would tell you their process, but they wouldn't tell you their recipe. It was $500 a seat back in 2007. And so Randy was turning 50 that year, and his wife gave him that class for his birthday. And Audrey was like, well, you got to go with him. There's no way you can let Randy go by himself. You've got him. Like, oh, it's $500. So we ended up driving to Lynchburg, and we get there, and I mean, it was a who's who at the time. Like Tuffy Stone was there at the class. Scotty Johnson was there at the class. I think he had just won the Jack at that point, or was getting ready to the next year maybe. But you looked around the room and it was like, we don't belong here. Like, these are all guys killing it out on the circuit. But no one was telling secrets back then. And if you've got the hottest team in barbecue willing to tell you something, they all showed up. And what we saw was they had an RV, they had a smoker, and they had 2 chairs under an awning. And that was it. If you came to our camp, it was like we had a 10 by 10 tent. We had a 10 by 20 tent. We had all this crap. And we would have 2 pickup trucks full of crap, a smoker and a trailer. And we'd bring it all out, and we'd set up all this stuff, and people would come, and we'd have food and drinks for them, and we'd be competing and entertaining all these people. And then when they walked through their process, he went to bed at a certain time every night at every contest. She would stay up, light the pit, then she'd go to bed, and then he'd get up about an hour later, and then he'd get to work. They had this rhythm every contest, and they were doing 40 to 45 contests, pulling this RV around the country. And the light bulb went off, and we were like, we have to quit doing all this stuff if we want to be competitive. And I don't know that there's anything from their process that we learned other than that. And it was worth every penny just to see the mindset of someone who was a real huge champion at the time. And it was keep it simple. And so I transitioned into a concession trailer the next year and built that out. And I had my smokers mounted. And so all I had to do was roll up, drop anchor, plug in, roll out the awning, and I would put out 2 chairs. And I would sit in one, and no one ever sat in the other one because I was antisocial. But I put out 2 chairs to remind me of their 2 chairs. So that was kind of a ritual. Every contest was I'd pop my 2 chairs out, and people would come and see me. But I would put my 2 chairs out just to remind myself of what I learned from them is keep it simple, don't do too much, but the things you do them well. And that was really the turning point for us. That was in March of 2007, and in September we'd improved enough to win our first contest.
Like I always say, you can overthink and definitely overwork yourself in a competition.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it would take us a week to recover because we were schlepping so much stuff out there, and you'd touch everything 4 times. You'd load the truck, unload the truck, load the truck again, come home, unload the truck to put it all away. And if you want to do that the next weekend, just forget about it. I mean, so we learned how to do this thing, again, process oriented. How can we do this with less steps? Because we were gonna kill ourselves if we wanted to do more than 8 contests, and that's what we were doing at the time, like 8 to 10. I remember thinking, I want to get to 12 contests a year. That was a big stretch for what we were doing at the time. So,
So, what's the biggest contest you have cooked?
well, American Royal, obviously. This year, Plowboys, it was our 15th year. I did not go for the first time this year. Randy cooked it solo. I had an opportunity to do a fundraiser for my hometown. I'm originally from Northwest Iowa. Grew up a little bit in the Sioux City area, but my family is from a small farm town called Peterson, Iowa. 350 people. That might include a couple dogs and cats, but small Iowa farm town. And so I've been wanting to do a fundraiser with them for about 3 or 4 years. And then COVID hit, and I was talking to a few people, and then COVID hit, and that put a damper on that. And I was talking to my uncle about it, and there was an event coming up. And so I reached out to the city, or reached out to the town, and said, I'd like to come do a fundraiser. You know, it's one of those little rural towns where the same 10 people are doing everything. So even a little bit of help helps them a lot. And especially for someone to come in and help with the work of doing the fundraising. So it just happened to be American Royal weekend. And I said, you know, I'll do it. I'll do it once. Next year, we're not going to do it American Royal weekend. But so I gave up going to the Royal this year, but we raised $10,000 for that little town serving barbecue. And they also enjoyed that, you know, I mean, they're very proud of me. And, you know, I was out there, you know, years ago throwing bales and walking beans and doing all that stuff. And, you know, now they see me with the restaurants in Kansas City, and they get to see me on TV now and then, and they just think that's amazing. And so for me to come back and be able to feed them, and it was a way for me to give back. You know, those small town roots mean an awful lot. Learned a ton of work ethic, and would not have half the success or any of the success I have now if it wasn't for that little town. So it was important for me to go do that. But yeah, I mean, the American Royal, I mean, that's every one of those major contests are special in their own way. But I mean, American Royal literally is the largest contest. And it's in my backyard, and I get to see so many people. And so my line is always to, you know, when I get to give a welcome or something like that, it's welcome to my city. And I just love Kansas City. I've been here 28 years, so I'm not originally from here, but it's my adopted home. I just love it here. And coming back from Orlando this weekend and landed yesterday, and I was like, oh man, it feels good to be home. So I don't know. Another one that was really special was the butt to butt, which hasn't been done in a long time, but it was the pork invitational in Shannon, Illinois, that Mike and Teresa Lake did. And it was kind of one of those special contests. They only took 10 entries, but you had to win a qualifying pork event like the American Royal, the Great American Barbecue, some of these others. You had to win pork at a certain contest in order to get invited. So it was a champions invitational. And I had won both the American Royal and the Great American. And so I got to go up in 2009 and compete in that and won. and you get a boar's tooth, an actual boar's tooth. Mike worked for Lynch Livestock. It was a big pork producer, and they'd go out and get a boar's tooth, and they'd put, butt to butt, 2,000 whatever, and put it on a lanyard, and that was your award. And so that was one. Being I was considered myself more of a pork cook than anything, and so that was one I really, really wanted, and I got the chance to go, and I won it. And then I got to go back the next year, and I got second place to Rob Gray. But that one was pretty special too, just because of what it was. I mean, it wasn't a big contest, but it was big to me.
So tell us about the American Royal and winning it. What was that experience like? How'd you place? How'd you do overall, or in the categories, or anything like that?
Right. So it was only our third year at the Royal, but we had been cooking for 10 years. And in 2008, 2007 was our first year that we went to the Royal. We always, again, we were terrible, and we were intimidated by the Royal. It was expensive from our consideration to go out there and spend all that money, and we didn't really know a lot of people, which is so ironic now. But we just thought, we always said we'll go when they invite us, which means we won somewhere. And since we weren't winning anywhere, we were just like, oh, that's a good excuse not to go. But we said, oh, we'll go when they invite us. And then 2007, by that time, we had met a lot of people. And we were like, we need to go and just go and have fun and hang out with our friends. And so we entered in 2007. We didn't do very well. We were fine, middle of the pack, whatever, but it was our first experience. 2008, we had won a contest. We'd actually won 3 contests by the time we got back to the Royal again. And so Andy Groneman cooked with me. And so Andy and I won pork in the Invitational the very first time we were entered in the Invitational, either one of us. And so we won pork. And then in 2009, all of a sudden, I had a dry spot where I was hitting a lot of reserves and a lot of top 5s, but I was not hitting a grand champion. And the very last weekend you could qualify, I went out in Burlington, Kansas, and got to get entered for 2009 in the Invitational. But if it wasn't for that last weekend, I wouldn't have been entered. So then a couple months later, it's time for the American Royal, and we're out there. And this time it was me cooking solo. Andy was cooking by himself. And so this one was kind of my cook. Randy had come and helped. But at that time, I was cooking a lot by myself. So we just kind of went with what I was doing at the time. And, we turned in our entries. And my son Michael was 5 at the time. And he had a little green egg. So he had a small. And I had contacted Ray. And I said, hey, Ray, what would you think about doing a little cooking demo? I know you're really busy at the Royal, but what would you think about having a little cooking demo on Michael's little egg? Because he was working with Big Green Egg and had the big egg tent. And so they did. Michael's 5, and they did a little cooking demo, and it was great. And they had so much fun. And he and Michael and Ray have a connection even today from that thing, 14 years ago. And so we wrap all that up and we go to awards, and we're not thinking, we're hoping for a call. I always said, I always want a call at the American Royal because it's like Rudy. In the movie Rudy, he wanted to play one play because that meant you were on the team. I always said, I want one call. I don't care if it's 20th and anything because it proves I was there, kind of a thing. So I'm on record. So I always wanted one call. And so we get there, and we were pretty terrible chicken cooks. That was always our worst category for a long time. And we ended up getting 5th place in chicken. And so that was like, not only did we get a ribbon at the Invitational out of 160 teams, 160 grand champions, we got a 5th in chicken. Like, the odds of that were pretty big for us. So that just felt like that was the weekend right there. I mean, if that's all we would have gotten, that would have been great. And then we go into ribs, and we didn't get a call. And then we go into pork, and we get an 8th place call. Well, shoot, we just got 2 calls at the American Royal that had never happened before. We'd only had the one first place pork the year before. And so, man, we just thought this is the greatest thing. And then they're going through brisket. And, after they get up to the top 10 or 5, I'm just barely paying attention. And they call third place Tuffy Stone, Cool Smoke. They call second place Butcher Barbecue, David Buska. And then they call first place Pork Plum Plowboys. And we just couldn't believe it. And the only thought in my head was, I have barbecue cooks getting a crown, getting one of those crown trophies at the American Royal is a big deal. If you have one, it's a big deal. And the only thing I could think of at the time was, holy crap, I have 2. This is my career. This is the most amazing thing. And who would have ever thought that I'd be holding a pork crown and a brisket crown? And if there's any 2 categories, those are barbecue to me, right? They're the big meats. Mm-hmm. So to have those 2 was, I just was standing up there, unbelievable. And I'm standing next to David and Tuffy, and I'm like, I don't belong with these guys, right? And so, it hadn't even occurred to me that we probably did pretty well. And Caveman Cuisine out of Joplin, Missouri, they still compete today. They've been competing almost as long as I have. They got first place pork, and they had a perfect score. Well, right there, that's going to set them up pretty well. So, and Tuffy had done pretty well. So I didn't go back up to the stands with my people. I went off to the side just because I was almost hyperventilating. And all of a sudden I started thinking, oh man, we might have gotten third place. I'm kind of trying to figure out, okay, we're probably, oh my God, we're probably top 3. It would have been the greatest barbecue day of my life. And they get to third and they call Tuffy. They call Cool Smoke. And I'm like, oh, I hope we really didn't bomb ribs that bad. Oh, I hope we're reserved. Because I thought Caveman was going to be first. And then they called Caveman. And I just was like, wow, we may have just done this. And then they called us. And I walked halfway across the dirt to the stage. I just had to stop and put my hands on my knees because I was about to pass out. And I get up there and they set you in the chair and they put the cape on you and put the crown on you and give you the big check, and someone's holding a banner behind you. I don't know if you can see that.
Yep.
But right there, that was riding a roller coaster. My heart, I could feel my chest just going, just breathing, almost hyperventilating. And I think it was David Buska was out right in front of the stage, and he's like, how's it feel? And I just remember going, it feels like I'm riding a damn roller coaster. It's crazy. It's just not a moment that I was remotely prepared for. It just, you have to be half good and half lucky. And we were the right amount of half for both of those that day. So it's a very, very hard thing to do. And that day, out of 150, 60 teams, I'm sure there was 70 of them that deserved to be first, right? They probably all had great cooks. We just happened to get the right calls, and we had a good cook ourselves. And so it was a pretty amazing day. It was one that I really, really appreciate. And, we got a $10,000 check, but I've always said I'll give it back if they want it back, because what we've been able to parlay off of that in terms of business and stuff, it just really, really launched a barbecue life for us, more than what was happening at the time. So it really kind of, and I had Yardbird out at the time, and Bovine Bold had just come out. So I had my second product out. So, the timing of that from a commercial standpoint was, it couldn't have happened at a better time too. It really, really put us on the map. So yeah, just, a walk across the dirt at Hale Arena, one day, 14 years ago has just turned into the greatest last decade and a half. I'm really, really grateful for that opportunity.
Well, that's
met a lot of amazing people along the way through restaurants and competing, and I still am. So.
Well, that's like QU from this year. What do you do after that? Like, what else can you, in the pinnacle of barbecue career, do? Like, I don't even know where would even go after that.
Yeah, it's funny. I had this I had the same thought after we won our first grand champion, because we worked for 7 years to win our first grand champion, and it's like, you're the dog that just caught the car. Now what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
So, and so I remember thinking that there was a contest out in West Bend, Kansas called Winter Q, and it was always in February. And so I went out in 2008 and drove all the way 5 hours out to Western Kansas in the middle of winter. And I'm sitting in my trailer thinking, what do I do now? I won my contest. I've been trying to win a contest for 7 years. Now what do I do? And I guess you just keep going. And it turns out Andy and I cooked a contest in Pleasant Hill like 2 months later, and we won that one. It's like, oh, that's what you do. You just keep trying to win more, I guess. So, I think when you're on a roll like that and you're hot and you've got it dialed in, man, just write it as long as you can, but be humble about it. And I think that we were humble about it the whole time. I hope we were, but I've seen it and I've experienced it where it doesn't last, and you'll get your time, but your time doesn't last forever. And so just appreciate it. And be humble about it. We never got invited to the Jack because we're from Missouri. So if you're from Missouri or Kansas and you're not traveling too much out of state, it's so hard. One year we had 5 bungs in the draw and didn't get drawn because there were 28 contests in Missouri and 26 in Kansas that year. So, I mean, our odds were pretty rough, but, I've seen people, that sucked. Like, we would have loved to have been invited to the Jack once and gone as a team. I've gone and judged, and it was a cool experience even as a judge, but that's not something that you can control. It's just literally the luck of the draw. But I've seen teams just in tears because they didn't get drawn for the Jack. I've seen, and that's when you're getting a little too vested. You're not enjoying it. You're putting too much pressure on what needs to happen. So that's my advice, is just, whatever level of success you're currently at, just enjoy it, and keep pushing for more, keep being competitive, because that's why we do this. But be humble, enjoy the ride. And my thing now is, after having a number of years of competing and having 10 years of running restaurants and 5 years of concessions at Arrowhead Stadium, there's a lot of lessons learned and a lot of things that I wish I would have known walking into this that I certainly would have done differently. And so now I'm trying to talk to the new guys and gals coming up and doing pop-ups at breweries and getting their first food truck or getting their first brick and mortar location. And I always go in, I always support them and give them business. I always introduce myself, and I always leave them with, anything I can do for you, let me know. And I'll get guys call me, and it's like, I'll tell you what I know. And if it helps you, it helps you. Or I'll tell you what I did. And if you want to mimic that, that's fine. But my thing lately, especially after closing the restaurant and having so many former employees and people from the community come up and express their gratitude for Plowboys, the restaurant, and what we did, it really kind of set my mindset and my heart in motion of giving back. And so my thing I keep saying lately is, I'd rather be a legacy than a legend. You know, I'll never be in the Barbecue Hall of Fame, and that's fine. But when my time's done, I'm going to have invested in some other people and helped other people along the way, just like, you know, we got helped along the way. And that's what it really should be about. So I'd much rather be a legacy in this industry and much rather be have other people enjoying success that I've been able to enjoy than to be revered as a legend. There's a lot of great legends out there that I don't hold a candle to. So
Gotcha.
they've done a lot of things.
So what made you to decide to start your own restaurant?
I was working an IT job for about 20 years, a little over 20 years. And all I could think about was all I could think about was barbecue and rub and sauce business. And I have an entrepreneurial heart. And so just my entrepreneurial bug just kept itching. And so things just fell in line. And I met someone who was part of a restaurant supply business, and just conversations led to, why don't we do a restaurant? And so what the hell, let's do it. And just took the leap at 43 years old. You know, we just took the leap and did it. And you know, the average restaurant lasts 4 to 4.5 years, and we were there for almost 10, right at 10. So, you know, we did not do everything that we wanted to do. We didn't achieve a lot of the things that we wanted to achieve or thought we could achieve, but there was a lot of things that came along that we didn't expect. You know, we got multiple national TV opportunities. We got to work with the Chiefs at Arrowhead for 5 years. That is one of the things I'm most proud of, because I know what it takes to do it, and it's hard. And to do it for 5 years, after we were done, they told us, Todd, you guys lasted longer than anybody. Most people lasted 1 year to 3 years. It's a tough gig out there. You've got 80,000 fans, and the last year we did it was the 2021 season, and so not this season, but the one before. And we had all of the barbecue at Arrowhead Stadium during a time when the team is the hottest it's ever been, and it's sellout crowds, 80,000 people. We had 27 cashiers in 4 stands in 4 different parts of the stadium. 27 cashiers doing 1,000 to 1,100 nachos, barbecue nachos a game. All that cheese sauce made scratch. I mean, we were doing hundreds of pounds of pork, hundreds of pounds of brisket every game. It would take us a day to go out and get set up. It would be a full day on your feet. I would track about 6 to 6.5 miles a game, running between stands, and it would be about an 8 to 10 hour day. And you know, we would do about, and you know, this was gross sales at the register. It wasn't what we made, but you know, we'd do $60,000 in sales in 4.5 hours.
Wow,
that's a crazy amount of business. And so, you know, I'm really, really proud of that. That was an opportunity we never thought would happen. But one of the things that's really served me well, even the very beginning, is I've always said yes. And then it's always, well, let's figure out how we're going to do it. But I've always said yes. And vastly more times than not, yes turned into a good thing. And every time we figured it out. And Arrowhead was one of those things that we had done enough vending. We had vended at the Royal for 3 years, and that really taught us a lot. So we knew we could take it to the next level at the stadium. And I'm really proud of what we did. We did a really, really good job. They liked us. They were really disappointed to see us go, but they understood. We were just tired. Bodies were worn out. We're 10 years older than we were before. And so the other one I'm really, really proud of is we catered at the World Pork Expo for 13 years. And the World Pork Expo is the pork industry's really international annual conference at the Iowa State Fairgrounds. So the Iowa State Fairgrounds is about 3.5 hours away from here. And Randy and his wife Sandy and Audrey and I, we would go up every year to, and there was a contest up there. So we would go up and compete. Randy and I would go up and compete. And we competed a couple of years, and someone came to us and said, hey, how would you guys like to come a couple days earlier and cater and then stay for the contest? We've got a pharmaceutical company, a livestock pharmaceutical company is looking for a caterer to serve about 1,800 people under their tent over 3 days. And so we're like, yes, how are we going to do that? You know? So we said yes. And the first year was like, I slept an hour and a half in 48 hours. Like we would cook, we'd clean up, and then we're cooking again. But imagine cooking for 1,800 people, lunch for 1,800 people in a parking lot, 3.5 hours away from home. Anything you need, you got to have at that parking lot. Yeah. So it was a huge logistical planning exercise. And every year they would hire us back before we left the tent. I mean, we all knew our movements. And by the end of that 13 years, the only reason we stopped was because of COVID. They canceled it. And then we retired. But by the end of it, we weren't even bringing our concession trailers anymore. We would bring pop-up tents, 2 smokers on trailers, and coolers, and we would just work. And then we had a cargo van, and we would just bring stuff up in that. So I mean, it got to the point where we were sleeping in hotels and going out for dinner, and we had it down so well that it was barely work the last few years. And it was just really great to see that progression of something that just really kicked our ass in the beginning for a few years, and then got to be something that was just, this is what we do this same weekend every year. And one year we had to go into shelter because a tornado was coming through. One year we had a microburst come through because this was always the second week of June, which is kind of tornado season. And we had a microburst come through it. I was in my trailer, he was in his, and they moved. You could feel your trailer move about 6 inches. And so there's some good memories from doing that stuff too. But I've always been proud of that because I challenge anyone to go 3.5 hours away from home with, you know, and be able to execute 1,800 people over multiple days. So it was a tough gig.
So what made you decide to start your own line of rubs and sauces?
Competitions being expensive. And so we really didn't have a name for ourselves much. And at the time, and Randy was starting to do some vending in his hometown of Concordia, Missouri. He was doing a little vending out of his trailer on the weekends. And he said, I'd love to have something that has our name on it that I could put there and sell that too. And he said that enough that I was like, well, shoot, I'm just going to do that. And so we had one recipe that was our own, and that was Yardbird. And so I just started working with it and bottled it and was making it myself for about the first year and a half. I'd have a plastic tote and a wooden spoon, and I'd put all the seasonings in, and I'd stir it up, and I'd make bottles. And then all of a sudden, people started carrying it. And it got to the point where when I had to make, it would take me 3 hours. It would take me all evening to make 30 bottles or 32 bottles. It'd take me 3 hours. And so by the time I measured everything, mixed everything, bottled everything, labeled everything, packaged everything, and it was the week that I had to do that 5 nights that I was like, I can't do this. This is too much. And I went out and found a co-packer, and I went to Old World Spices, and that's who I've been with ever since. And that was 2008. And, you know, talk about things just falling in line. So I started with them in 2008, and I always did it myself because I thought I'd be cheaper doing it myself. I could save money because I wasn't going to sell a lot of this. So it had to be worth my time. And turns out they were doing it cheaper than I was because they were able to buy things at volume and whatnot. And then I didn't have to spend all the time doing it. But then fast forward about 18 months later, and we win the American Royal. 3 weeks after winning the American Royal, I was in the office of Old World Spices, and they were just starting. Bass Pro had come to them and said, we want to get away from the bigger commercially produced things we have on our shelves, and we want to get some barbecue champions and do a champions line. So Mike and Debbie Davis, Matt Lambert won the Memphis in May the same year I won the Royal. That was his first one. He had Sweet Swine of Mine just out. So it was Mark and myself, and Mike and Debbie Laudable, and I don't remember who the other one was, but we were the first ones to go on Bass Pro shelves back in 2009. And if I wouldn't have been working with Old World and doing it myself at home, I never would have gotten that opportunity. I wouldn't have won the American Royal. I wouldn't have had that opportunity. So all those things just fell in line right at the right time. I'm still in Bass Pro today, 14 years later. And from that, I'm still in the Champions program with Old World. And they're still distributing things around the world for us. We're in 20 countries, 4 continents, over 4,000 retailers. Like, we don't even know every place we're at. But all that stuff was just being at the right place at the right time and saying yes. So, but yeah, doing the rubs was just to figure out how to do more contests because they were expensive and we weren't winning a lot of money at them. So we had to figure out some way to pay for this thing. Yeah, now it's paying a mortgage payment. So that's good.
I actually have a bottle of Yardbird up on my shelf.
There you go.
So what smokers do you cook on for home and competition?
Well, restaurant was Old Hickory. We had an SSE for a long time, and then we moved to SSJs because we needed the capacity. I also have an FEC 500 on a trailer. That was something that I got right after winning the Royal. I was cooking on FEC 100s while I was competing. And I still have one. I had 3 of them at one point, 2 of them on a trailer and one in the garage. It was like my practice pit. And I got rid of 2 of them, but I'm still holding on to the one, and I'll never get rid of the one. It's one of them that was on my trailer. So that is below my deck, and I cook on that every now and then. And then I've got some Yoder smokers. I've got a 640 pellet. So we were pellet. And I think I'm the first person to win one of the world championships on pellets, the overall. There's been people do it since, but I mean, that was a long time ago, and pellets were around. They were still a bit emerging. There was a lot more people cooking on pellets. Now everyone's got drums, but so I've got a 640 pellet smoker below the deck, and then I've got a Gateway drum. I've got a Yoder stretch Cimarron on an axle that's in my garage. So it's very, very similar looking to a Jambo. Cooks different. The firebox is a lot lower, and so it doesn't cook as hot and fast as a Jambo. And the air doesn't flow up and across as hot and fast. It's more of a low and rise. So it's got a baffle in it. So it's a little more traditional to some of the older Texas style offsets. So I've got that. My kids, one year for Christmas, we made them barrel smokers out of 30 gallons. So they have their little, that's what they cook kids' Q on. We've got 4 big green eggs. So I tend to go back and forth between a pellet grill, pellet smoker. I like using the stick burner, the Yoder stick burner, when I have time to do that. That's the hard part. But when I do that, it's more for wanting to play with airflow and tending fires and just kind of flexing those muscles a little bit. And then the big green egg, I love cooking on the ceramic. It's really, really versatile. And with that, you really have to dial those things in. And then once you do, so when I first got my first big green egg, I wanted to do a test and see how long I could burn that thing. and I went 36 hours and cooked 5 meals on it on one charcoal load. So once you dial those in, and to me, it's like each one has its own different kind of challenges. Even a pellet smoker, if you want to get smoke flavor, you got to know how to cook on them. We would always run 3 temperatures. We'd start out really, really, really low, and then go up, and then once it go up a little bit higher to get things moving and get through the stall, and then when we would wrap, then we'd crank it up. But if you're trying to cook at 225, you're not going to get any smoke on it, but you'll get more if you cook at 170 or 180. So you get asked a lot. Well, how long will it take me to cook a pork butt? Well, I don't know. What are you cooking on? Because it's going to make a big difference. And what temperature do I cook at? I don't know. What are you cooking on? It's going to make a big difference. There's not one answer. And the very first thing is you got to know how to run your pit, run your barrel, your whatever it is you're cooking on. That's the first thing you got to figure out. So I got to the point where I had 20 different grills and smokers. And so then I self-imposed a 20 rule. Like if I bought one, I had to sell one. So I've got a pellet charbroiler from Cook Shack. Trying to think what's out in storage. So I've had a lot of different things. I've had gravity fed stuff. I've had, a lot of Weber grills and bullets and things like that. So I would get things sometimes just because I wanted to experience how to cook on it. I had gravity fed for a while. I never competed on it, but I didn't really cook a whole lot on it, but I wanted to kind of learn. They were kind of hot for a while, and I wanted to figure those out. So I like cooking on different things. Again, it's the experience of it and the fun of it and the challenge of it. I mean, all this stuff's a challenge.
Yes. So what social media do you have?
I'm not really doing a whole lot in social media, and I need to change that. But we've got a couple Instagram accounts. So Plowboy Todd is my personal one on Instagram, and then Plowboys BBQ. Plowboys BBQ on Instagram and Facebook, Twitter. So now that the restaurants are closed, just not a lot of fodder for that stuff, and we've been closing down the restaurant business and stuff. Even though the doors closed in August, we just finally closed on the physical building and sold that last week. So there's been a lot of stuff going on, but I really need to get back into social media.
So what does the future look like? Are you going to get back on the comp trail or?
No, I don't see myself getting back on the competition trail. I mean, it could happen, but again, it'd have to be a lot of things really clear themselves out in life, because if I'm going to do it, I want to do 40 weekends, and I want to be practicing at home, and I want to be I want to devote to it, and I don't have the time to do that right now. What I see right now is what I tend to be doing now is I don't really see new products, but I like mentoring, and I like talking with people who are starting out. I'm really trying to be active in the Kansas City barbecue scene, just encouraging people. I have somebody that they've been around a while. They've been around several years, but they're wanting to figure out, now that their volume's increasing, kind of how to do briskets. And so we're going to get together. I'm going to go in and help them for a couple of days. And so, like I said earlier, it's more about being a legacy than a legend for me right now. I really want to give back and appreciate the opportunities I've been given. And I want to see some other people succeed. And kind of, we had a chance to, like I said, to get one crown at the American Royal was like, that's a barbecue competitor's dream. And we got 4 of them. That box is checked. We've got over 500 awards. I mean, there's that box is checked. Running a restaurant, 10 years, that box is checked. Catering, concessions, festivals. I worked with the Q festivals for about a year and a half this last year and a half, and did 5 festivals with them in a year. And Denver was 35,000 people. You know, there was 11 of us pitmasters cooking for 35,000 people over 48 hours.
Whew.
And so, I mean, that box checked, right? Like, so I don't know. Right now, I think I just want to step back a little bit. I want to assess where this rub and sauce business is going. And I want to live vicariously through some of these other guys that are willing to stay up nights and tend to pit, because I don't want to do that right now. I need to rest.
I think I saw, weren't you kind of helping Smoke and Magic too, or it used to be Black Magic, but now it's with their airport adventure?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just encouraging them. I mean, I wish them luck, and they're going to be cooking on Old Hickories, and so you know, I had invited them over to take a look at the one we had before we sold it, and we learned how to cook on those pretty well. So, you know, just offering up what we know to them. But I mean, I'm not helping them in any like real significant way, but definitely good people, and they're going to do really, really well. And I like being around people like that, because right now they've got all the excitement, and I remember having all that excitement, all the adrenaline. Like, I lived off of adrenaline for like 6 months when we first opened, and the more people told you couldn't do it, the more you're like, well, now I'm gonna do it because you said I couldn't.
Yep.
The one advice that I learned too late, and I learned at the end, when we were getting ready to close and we knew we were going to close, someone who's a business mentor, I was talking with her, and she advised me to read a book called Finish Big. And it's a book for entrepreneurs. And when you're in the beginning of something, you're all about the launch. Like right now, they're all about, the launch of this new airport and their restaurant, and all your energy and all your focus and all your mental capacity just goes right toward the launch, because it's a big deal and you want to do it right. And there's so many things to think about. Then once you get up and going, then it's operations. Like, okay, I got to keep this thing operational, and okay, where do I need to tweak things? Because not everything goes great out of the gate. So, and then it's just keeping the thing going. And what we don't think about is, what does the end of this look like? We think about what the beginning is going to look like. We have a vision for that. We think about how it's going to be once we get it up and going. We have a vision for that. But what we don't think about is, what's the end game? And particularly for those of us that are more entrepreneurial in nature, there's usually an end game. Maybe it's, I just want to get it stood up. I want to run it for a year, show a profit, and sell it. Maybe I want to run this thing until I die. Maybe I want to run this thing and give it off like Black's Barbecue, over 90 years. Probably America's oldest barbecue restaurant, a multi-generational thing. Maybe that's what you want to do. But if you don't think, even in the beginning, maybe even before the launch, you got to give what's at the end of this thing, or what could be at the end of this thing. You got to give it some thought, otherwise you'll never get there. So it's a book called Finish Big. And the first introduction to the book just kind of tees up that whole mindset of, how do you know where you're going if you haven't even thought about it? And that was one thing that I wish we would have had a little better idea going into the restaurant. Like, where do we see this thing? And I think we may have had, some idea, but we weren't really working toward it. And I think it really helps you make decisions along the way. If you know you're only wanting to do this for a limited number of years before you retire, maybe you want to groom it for an employee to take over, or you want to groom it for a family member to take over, whatever it is, everything in life, even life itself, has an end. So we have to think about what that end might look like and prepare for it as we go. So that's one of the things that at the end of the restaurant experience really was a learning for me. And so as I see people starting up new things, I'm giving them that, like, hey, just make sure you spend a little time thinking about where do you want this thing to be. It could be 100 years from now. That's okay. But just give a little thought on where things need to be.
After winning a couple of awards down at NBBQA, we had that 18-hour drive back to KC. Wife and I were kind of talking about that. Like, where do we want the rubs to go? What is our goal? Where's our next step? I mean, we're in 15 stores, and like I told her, we're running it right now. We need to take the step back, let someone else cover distribution, get us out so we can keep a focus on the operational end on the backside.
And I think with that, you could say, well, I'm in, what'd you say, 15 stores?
Yeah.
Okay, so you could say, well, I'm in 15 stores. I want to be on 10,000 shelves.
Yeah.
Okay, well, do you know what it's going to take to do that? And there's going to be a lot of sacrifice and a lot of work, and it's going to mean that you may not get to go to certain family events or your kids events sometimes, or there's always going to be sacrifice, whether it's in competition or in business. And so 10,000 shelves or 5,000 shelves or even 100 sounds great, but does that fit in with the other things I want to do with my life too? And so I think entrepreneurs, some of us can get so laser focused on one aspect of success in life that we forget about the rest. And going into the restaurant, that was something, because my kids were younger back then. They were in elementary school, and it was like, I can't have the restaurant take over my life because it's not fair to them. It's not fair to me. I don't want that either. So how do I create that balance while fulfilling this dream and the dream of being a father? So yeah, I think those conversations, I'm glad you guys had 18 hours to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because that's what it takes. It takes some, what one of my other mentors calls white space. You have to create white space in your life sometimes just to get clarity and make sure that, the weeds that we're cutting down are even in the right jungle. And the other conversation I was having this weekend, I've kind of almost relative to this, is, now that the restaurants are over, I'm not as busy, but I don't feel like I've pulled back. I feel like it's more like recoiled. Like, I just don't know quite what I'm going to do yet, but I'm not pulling back. Instead, I'm just kind of assessing, figuring out what maybe the next move is. So I was having this talk with somebody else who's going through a change. They closed a chapter and now and he says, I'm going to take 6 months and kind of figure out what I want that next thing to be. And it's so smart because you need that white space. If it's 6 months, if it's a year, if it's whatever, otherwise you jump into something else and it's not the right fit. So I told him, I said, don't feel like, if ever you feel like you're pulling back, just say to yourself, I'm not pulling back. I'm recoiling like a panther. I'm getting ready to pounce. So I'm just trying to evaluate how I'm going to do this next thing. So make sure you're taking a lot of white space in your time, and talk to your wife, who's your partner. So
because we were discussing, we're right at that edge of our small co-packer to the next, and I'm like, I'm not old world caliber yet, but do I just go ahead and make that jump and just miss the next one because I'm gonna have to do it again eventually?
Right. Yeah, and there's always those ceilings that we start bumping up to, but then to break through them takes a lot more work, and you got to know that you're ready for that too, I think.
Yep. Oh yeah.
But it's good going to things like NBBQA because you get to talk to so many people that have been through the level that you're at and beyond, and I like going out and talking to Sucklebusters and the Shed and Cosmo. I mean, because these guys are beyond levels that I'm at. And so it lets me evaluate. I was talking to Sucklebusters and I was like, man, I feel like I should be in more control of what I'm doing instead of distributors. And he says, are you happy with it? Are they doing okay for you? I said, yeah, they're making me money. And he's like, well, then keep going with it. Don't feel like you're doing something wrong because someone else is doing something different. And I thought that was great advice. And so it really kind of settled my mind on, how I'm approaching my business. And just that's where I know my next step is in rubs and sauces. I'm just trying to figure out what that looks like. So.
Yeah. Dan's a good guy. He said virtually the same. He was like, if you're happy with what you're doing, you don't have to do what I'm doing.
Yep.
Just focus.
Yep. My biggest fear, I mean, even after doing this for 17 years, I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And so my biggest fear is getting in and starting to mix with the deals and the selling and buying and distribution. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if you sat in on Dan and Brooks session, but, talking about, you can make deals that sound great, but then on the backside, that fine print and all those things that may come back on you, like, whoa, wait a minute. All of a sudden I'm upside down on something that was supposed to be a great deal. Yeah. So I don't want to go in and mess with something, not knowing enough about how that whole process works. And then all of a sudden I've created a mess for myself. And I'm going the direction of success.
That's what we were discussing, was we want to be in charge of the operations. That way we know where we're going into and everything. Right now we're doing the distribution ourselves. So it's kind of everything for us. So I know where we're at. I'll contact them. I'll go see them, ship to them, deliver to them if they're around our area, or we're like Mississippi. We went and did a showcase. Mm-hmm. I was like, you need an order while I'm coming down, let me know. It saves money. Right. So it's things like that I'm glad we do, but I need to kind of take a step back, go do the showcases and find the distributor right now.
Yeah. Yep.
We'll get there one day.
You'll get there. Yeah, I think, like I said, just keep saying yes to things.
Yeah.
If they make sense, say yes to it. And if you don't quite know how to do it, you'll figure it out. We've done so much of that. Like, yeah, we'll do that. All right, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
That's pretty much my motto.
Right.
Wife said all the time, well, how are you going to do it? I was I'll figure it out.
That's right. We'll figure it out. Figure it out worse.
Well, Brian, do you have anything else before I let him go?
No. See you next year at NBBQA.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll be there.
Well, thank you for coming on. Hope you enjoy the rest of your night.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Been good talking with you.
Thanks, Todd.
Talking barbecue and business.
Yes, sir.
Take care.
Thanks.